The reception hall shimmered with golden light, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the polished dance floor. Fairy lights lined the edges of the room, and the faint aroma of roses mixed with the sweetness of chocolate fountains. Guests laughed in clusters, glasses clinked in celebration, and the band at the corner played soft music that matched the romantic hum of the night. Emily tightened her grip on the camera strap that hung heavy against her neck, her palms damp with nerves. This wasn't supposed to be her evening, not in this role at least. Her cousin Mia, the actual wedding photographer, had been struck down by a sudden wave of food poisoning just hours before, and with no backup available, Mia had begged Emily to step in. Emily had tried to refuse. Photography was just a hobby for her, not something she ever thought she'd do professionally, but Mia had insisted. And so here she was, dressed in a plain black dress, hoping she looked professional enough, and praying no one would notice the way her hands trembled every time she lifted the camera. She moved carefully through the crowd, trying to blend in, capturing whatever seemed natural. A grandmother wiping a tear during the couple's first dance, two children sneaking away from the dessert table with frosting on their fingers, the bride leaning in close to whisper something in her groom's ear while both of them laughed. For a moment, Emily's nerves faded, replaced by the thrill she always felt when she caught a fleeting expression that most people would have missed. It wasn't about perfection, it was about truth, about little fragments of emotion frozen in time. But as she lowered the camera to adjust her settings, her eyes caught on someone across the room. A man stood near the edge of the dance floor, his tall, broad frame impossible to miss even in the crowd. He was dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, the cut of it clean and commanding, as though he was someone used to being in control, someone important. Yet Emily's gaze wasn't drawn to his presence alone, it was to the small figure at his side. A little girl clutched his hand, her dark hair falling loose from a tiny tiara, her face turned up toward him with pure trust. The man's expression softened as he crouched down to her level, straightening the tilted crown and brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. It was such a simple gesture, but it was filled with tenderness, the kind that made Emily's heart squeeze. Almost without thinking, she raised her camera and clicked. The shutter captured the moment, the strength of the man's protective posture, the little girl's innocent smile, the unspoken bond that seemed to shine between them. She took another, shifting her angle slightly, drawn in by the natural warmth that radiated from them. It was unlike the posed smiles she'd taken all evening. This was real, intimate, unguarded. For a second, Emily forgot she was supposed to be invisible. The man glanced up suddenly, as though sensing her gaze. Their eyes met across the room, and Emily froze. His eyes were a striking shade, sharp, intelligent, assessing, but what caught her was the flicker of curiosity in them. She fumbled slightly with her camera, lowering it too quickly, heat rushing to her cheeks. She told herself to look away, to slip back into the crowd, but something about the intensity of his gaze rooted her in place. The little girl tugged on his sleeve, and his expression softened again as he leaned down to listen, his smile small but genuine. Emily exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. She quickly turned away, raising her camera toward another group of guests, pretending to be busy. Still, the image lingered in her mind, the contrast of power and tenderness, the way his world seemed to orbit around that little girl. Emily reminded herself that she wasn't here to get distracted. She was just a stand-in, a fill-in photographer for a single evening, and once the night was over, she would step back into her ordinary life. Yet as the music swelled and laughter carried through the air, she couldn't shake the strange pull she'd felt in that brief exchange. She didn't know who he was, and she had no reason to. But something deep inside whispered that this was not the last time their paths would cross. Daniel Carter wasn't the kind of man who usually lingered at weddings. He had come mostly for the bride's family, business partners his company worked closely with, but as soon as he arrived, he found his attention firmly tethered to Lily. His daughter adored weddings, from the dresses to the music, and tonight she was glowing with excitement, spinning in her white and pink gown like a princess straight out of her favorite storybook. Daniel smiled faintly as he watched her, though the smile didn't come easily. His life was structured, efficient, full of meetings and deadlines, with very little room for moments like this. Still, when Lily looked up at him with shining eyes, asking if he would dance with her later, he knew he could never say no. He wasn't expecting anyone to approach him. Most people in the room knew who he was, CEO of Carter Enterprises, the man who built an empire from the ground up, and they either kept their distance out of intimidation or approached him with stiff politeness, eager to talk business. But the woman who stepped closer now was neither rehearsed nor polished. She was clutching a camera, her smile nervous but genuine. "Would it be all right if I took a few photos of you and your daughter?" she asked softly, as though afraid of intruding. Her voice carried none of the slick confidence he was used to, but something about the earnestness in it caught his attention. Daniel hesitated for a moment. He usually avoided cameras. Publicity shots were bad enough, and he had little patience for being paraded as part of an image. But then he looked down at Lily, who was tugging at his sleeve with a hopeful grin. "Please, Daddy," she asked, her voice bright. And just like that, his answer was decided. "All right," he said, his tone gentle, meant more for Lily than the photographer. The woman, Emily, though he didn't know her name yet, crouched slightly so she was closer to Lily's height. "You look like a real princess tonight," she said warmly. Lily beamed, instantly charmed, and struck a pose that made Daniel chuckle under his breath. Emily laughed too, not the restrained, professional laugh he might have expected, but a free, genuine sound that carried over the music. She began snapping shots, encouraging Lily to spin and twirl, capturing each burst of laughter as if she were weaving a story through her lens. Daniel found himself watching Emily almost as much as he was watching his daughter. She wasn't barking orders or stiffly arranging them into positions. Instead, she moved with ease, adjusting her angle, crouching low to catch Lily's wide-eyed grin, stepping back to frame Daniel in the moment too. She treated it less like work and more like play, and Lily responded to that effortlessly. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he had seen his daughter laugh so openly with someone she had just met. When the camera finally clicked its last shot, Emily lowered it, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Thank you," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You two are very photogenic." She paused as if realizing how that sounded, and her face grew pinker. "I mean, you make a beautiful picture together." Daniel raised a brow, amused by her flustered tone. Most people tried so hard to impress him, but she seemed almost determined not to. "Do you do this often?" he asked, curiosity slipping into his voice. Emily hesitated, her hand tightening slightly around the camera strap. "Actually, no, I'm just filling in tonight. My cousin's the real photographer. I'm more of a hobbyist." He should have been surprised, but he wasn't. Something about her unpolished honesty matched what he had already sensed. She wasn't here to dazzle anyone or sell herself, she was simply trying her best. And for reasons he couldn't quite place, that intrigued him far more than someone with a perfected pitch or a carefully curated smile. As Emily stepped back, Lily skipped to her side, tugging at the hem of her dress. "You're really nice," the little girl declared with all the blunt honesty of a child. Emily laughed softly, crouching again to meet Lily's eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. You made my job very easy." Daniel watched the exchange, a strange warmth stirring in him. He told himself it was nothing, just gratitude for someone making his daughter so happy. But as Emily lifted her camera again to return to the crowd, he found himself watching her longer than he should, wondering why it felt like the night had shifted in some subtle, irreversible way. Most of the guests had drifted toward the dance floor by now, the air alive with laughter and the rhythm of the band. Couples twirled under the warm lights, the bride and groom moving like they were in their own world. Daniel lingered near the edge of the crowd, his tie loosened just slightly, his watchful eyes always flicking toward Lily, who had joined a group of children chasing each other across the floor. For once, he let himself relax, a glass of champagne in hand. That's when he noticed her again. The stand-in photographer, sitting alone at the booth with her camera resting in her lap, scrolling through the images she had taken. Emily looked both absorbed and anxious, her brows furrowed as though she was silently critiquing every shot. Daniel hesitated, then found himself walking toward her before he could talk himself out of it. It was a strange impulse. Usually, he avoided small talk with strangers, especially at social events where every conversation carried a hidden agenda. But something about her quiet focus pulled him in. "Long night." His voice was low, carrying just enough to draw her attention. Emily glanced up, startled, then offered a nervous smile. "You could say that, I'm still trying to convince myself I haven't ruined the entire wedding album. Daniel raised a brow, amused. From what I've seen, you captured things no one else would think to. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you. Her lips curved into a small, surprised smile. She's a natural. Honestly, she made my job easy. Daniel set his glass down on the edge of the booth, leaning slightly closer. You're not like most photographers I've met. Emily blinked, unsure if that was a compliment. Is that good or bad? Good, he said simply. You make people comfortable. You made her comfortable. A silence followed, not awkward but full of something unspoken. Emily glanced down at her camera again, scrolling to one of the images and hesitantly turning the screen toward him. Here, this one's my favorite. It was a candid of Lily spinning, her skirt flaring, her face caught mid-laughter. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest as he studied it. He saw more than just his daughter's joy. He saw the way Emily had framed it, how she'd frozen a piece of his world he often felt slipping past him too quickly. You've given me something I didn't even realize I needed, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Emily's gaze softened, but she didn't press him. Instead, she listened as he began to talk, slowly at first, then with more ease. He told her about Lily's love for drawing and fairy tales, how balancing late-night board meetings with bedtime stories was the hardest challenge he'd ever faced. He admitted things he rarely voiced aloud, about the loneliness that crept in even when surrounded by success, about the way he sometimes worried Lily deserved more than he could give. Emily didn't interrupt. She didn't offer clichés or polished advice. She simply listened, her eyes reflecting a quiet understanding that felt strangely rare. You're doing better than you think, she said softly when he finally paused. She's happy. You can see it in the way she looks at you. Daniel studied her, struck by how easily she cut through to the truth. No one in his world spoke to him like that, without pretense, without calculation. Just honesty. Before he could respond, Lily appeared at Emily's side, her cheeks flushed from dancing. Come with me, she chirped, tugging at Emily's hand. Dance with us. Emily laughed, startled, glancing at Daniel as though silently asking if it was all right. He nodded, unable to stop the smile tugging at his lips. He watched as Emily let herself be pulled onto the dance floor, her laughter ringing out as she twirled with Lily. Daniel leaned back, his eyes never leaving them. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, a warmth he hadn't allowed himself in so long. It wasn't just admiration. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the beginning of something he hadn't expected to find tonight, and it both unsettled and stirred him. Watching them together, he realized he wasn't ready for this evening to end. The wedding was winding down, the music softer now, the crowd thinning as guests began to say their goodbyes. The bride and groom were on the dance floor for one last slow song, and waiters moved quietly through the hall, collecting empty glasses and discarded napkins. Emily stood near the booth, reviewing the final batch of photos on her camera. Her shoulders ached from carrying the equipment all night, but more than that, her chest felt tight with nerves. She wasn't Mia, she reminded herself. She was just the stand-in, and she worried that when the couple saw the photos, they would know. They would see the shaky edges, the unpolished angles, the way she had followed her instincts instead of sticking to the kind of formula professionals used. She was so deep in thought that she didn't notice Daniel approaching until his voice broke through. Do you mind if I take a look? Emily turned quickly, nearly fumbling with her camera. Oh, I'm not sure they're ready yet. I still have to sort through. But he was already there, close enough for her to catch the faint scent of his cologne, warm and steady. His presence was commanding, but not in the cold, distant way she had expected of him. He was watching her with quiet patience, waiting. Something in his gaze made her hand move almost on its own as she scrolled to the images and tilted the screen toward him. The first photo was of Lily twirling, her tiara tilted slightly, her laugh caught mid-motion. Then another, of Daniel kneeling to tie her shoe, his expression soft and unguarded. Another, of Lily resting her head on his shoulder, her eyes heavy with sleep. Daniel's throat tightened as he studied them. He didn't see a businessman in those frames, or the CEO whose every move was analyzed in magazines. He saw something much more fragile, much more real, himself as a father, seen through someone else's eyes. For years, he had worried that he wasn't enough, that the world saw him as too hard, too driven, too untouchable to be what Lily needed. But here, in these photos, there was proof of the bond he fought so hard to protect. "These are beautiful," he said finally, his voice low, almost rough with sincerity. He looked at her then, not just with gratitude but with something deeper. "You didn't just take pictures. You captured us." Emily swallowed hard, caught off guard by the intensity in his tone. "I'm glad you like them. Honestly, I wasn't sure. I was afraid they wouldn't be enough." "They're more than enough," Daniel said firmly, almost as though he needed her to believe it. He hesitated, then added more quietly, "It's been a long time since someone showed me something I didn't know I was missing." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the fading melody of the band. Emily's pulse quickened under his gaze, and for the first time that evening, she didn't feel like she was hiding behind the camera. She felt seen. Lily stirred then, her small figure padding up to them, her eyes heavy with sleep. She leaned against Daniel's side but reached out to take Emily's hand. "Daddy," she mumbled, her voice drowsy but determined, "can Emily come with us tomorrow?" Emily froze, her eyes widening in surprise, but Daniel only chuckled softly, his hand brushing gently over his daughter's hair. He glanced back at Emily, his expression tender but steady. "I'd like that very much," he said, his voice carrying a quiet certainty. Emily's heart thudded against her ribs. She had walked into this night expecting nothing but stress and the responsibility of helping her cousin. She had expected to slip back out unnoticed once the job was done. Yet somehow, in the span of one evening, her world had shifted. She smiled softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Then, maybe I'll see you both tomorrow," she whispered, almost afraid to break the fragile magic of the moment. Daniel nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I hope you do." And as the last notes of the music faded, Emily realized that sometimes, stepping into the wrong place at the wrong time could lead to exactly where you were meant to be.